Hello everyone! So today I'm going to show you how to build an API and make passive income from it as a developer. I'm going to show you how to do this step by step by making a Node.js application that uses Express as well as the package Axios and Cheerio with a beginner approach, making it as accessible to as many people to follow along as possible. By the end of this tutorial, you will have the knowledge of how to build an API that you can make money off and sell. And we will end with going through the steps of how to list it on the RapidAPI marketplace. As a developer, when you launch your API on the RapidAPI platform, you can essentially sell access to it for those that want to utilize what you have made. This access comes in tiers that you can set yourself, allowing you to have full control over how you monetize what you have built. And as it is the largest hub for APIs out there at this moment in time, the footfall will be in our favor, meaning that you could take your API idea from a simple form of passive income to a full-blown startup, depending on how much time you want to dedicate to it. So, what are we waiting for? Let's do it. The only prerequisites I ask of you before starting this video is have a basic understanding of JavaScript, or if you're feeling adventurous, please follow along anyway. There will not be a huge amount of code involved, and you have my permission to take what I have built and change it to fit your needs. But first, let's refresh ourselves on what an API is. An API stands for Application Programming Interface. They allow for technologies to essentially talk with each other and are essential to so many services that we rely on today. They are behind most apps we use on a day-to-day basis, as they can shape the information passed between one technology to another. And they can even connect things such as our microwaves or cars to the internet. APIs are everywhere. As a developer, you might use TikTok's API to get a live TikTok feed onto your website, or even use them in a two-way stream to get, post, or delete data from a movie system, for example. There's a reason why these words are popping up, and that is because these are the most popular HTTP request methods. In fact, I can use them to either get data from this endpoint, post new data to that endpoint, edit data with the put request to this particular endpoint, or delete all the data at this endpoint if I wish. The endpoint is essentially an address that points to a specific chunk of the data that we are working with. And this is exactly what we will be building today. We are going to be deciding what happens and what kind of data returns back to us if we visit a certain endpoint that we construct ourselves. If this is the first time you are seeing the word API and I have not come across one before, I do have a tutorial on them that will go into much more detail than this refresher explainer that I invite you to try. However, if you feel comfortable or would like to carry on, let's get to setting up our project. Okay, so I hope you're ready. In this tutorial, I'm going to be building an API that tells us climate change news from all the various publications all over the world in one place, and people can choose to purchase this information from us. We can do this with any publications. I'm going to choose to go on the topic of climate change, but if you want to go on the topic of crypto, that is completely up to you. Now, I did mention that we will be using the RapidAPI platform, so please go ahead and sign up. I'm just going to sign up with Google. And I'm just going to select my account that I want to associate with RapidAPI and just wait for that to complete. I'm just going to fill in my name, Ania, organization, NA, and click done. Great. So here are all the APIs to our disposal. As I said, as you will see, there's lots and lots of APIs. However, I want to create my own API. So I'm just going to go ahead and click here and then leave it at this point. Now it's time to start coding our API. So here we are. I'm just going to start off by creating a blank project using WebStorm. Please feel free to use whatever code editor you wish and just create an empty directory. So just like this, so we can start completely from scratch. Okay? Before we get going, I also just want to make sure that everyone watching has Node.js installed on their machines. Node is an open source server environment. We will be using it to create our own server, or in other words, backend. It is free and allows us to use the JavaScript and language in order to create our backend, so I am a big fan. Now, I am using a Mac, so I will just click right here in order to download this onto my machine. However, here are some other options for you for installing the source code. Okay, so just choose whichever one applies to you. Now, I already have this installed, so once that is done for you, let's get up our terminals and check that it has worked. To check this has worked, I am simply going to type Node-V. V is for version. This will show me the version of Node that I have installed on my computer. This version is very important. If you are watching this sometime in the future and for some reason this tutorial is not working, one of the reasons could be is that the dependencies we are going to use and their versions might not be compatible with our Node version. This is also the case when working with other projects, not just this one, so keep that in mind as you progress on your journey to becoming a web developer. Okay, great. You can actually also easily switch your Node versions by installing the version that you need using nvm install and then the version. So that is now done. Now we are using Node version 0.1032. So that is something you can do if you need to use a different Node package. For now, let's go back to using the first one that we have. So I'm going to go nvm use, and the package that we had is 14.17.6. And great. So once again, we are now using this version of Node. That's the one we have just downloaded. Now that we have that, we need to install one more thing if we are using Macs, and that is Homebrew. Homebrew is a free and open source software package management system that we will be working with and installing packages with in the next section. So we need this in order to do that. Okay, great. Let's carry on. Now it's time to get coding. The first thing we need to do is run npm init. This will trigger initialization and spin up a package.json file. We are doing this so that we can install packages or modules into our project to use. If you want to have a look at the thousands and thousands of packages to our disposal as a developer, just visit npmjs.com. For example, if we Google a popular package, let's say React, we can see exactly what it does, how to install it, and how many times it is being installed into projects all over the world. Okay, so that is where you can find all the packages. Now let's go back to our terminal. As a general rule, any project that uses Node.js will need to have a package.json file. The package.json file does a lot more than just hold our packages and the versions of them that we need. So if you'd like to know more about it, please pause here and Google Beginner's Guide to Using NPM. However, if you're comfortable with that, let's carry on. So let's go ahead and create our package.json file that we have been talking so much about using the command npm init, making sure that we are in the directory that we just created, okay, so in our project. So this is how we do it. Once again, we have just written the command npm init, and now we are prompted to answer these questions. So do we want to call our package name Climate Change API? Yes, I'm just going to click enter. This is the first version that we are building. The description for now I'm going to leave blank. The entry point is going to be an index.js file that we create. The test command we're going to leave blank, and I'm just going to leave all these blank for now and click enter. So now if we look in our Climate Change API directory, we can see a package.json file has been created with all the keys that we are asked to fill out. As you can see, Climate Change API has been generated, version 1. We left the description blank. We have said that our entry point is going to be an index.js file, and we have one script. The author we left blank. We can give it an author name. I'm going to put Ania Kubo. And that's it for now. This is essentially where we're going to see all the packages that we're going to need to work with to create our web scraper. Great. So I'm just going to minimize that and create an index.js file. So once again, just in the root of my Climate Change API project, I'm going to create a new file. This is going to be a JavaScript file. I'm going to call it index. So now we have the point of entry for our app. Okay, this is essentially our server. We're going to write our code to create our server in this file. Now, The first package that we are going to install to use, so we're going to install it. I'm going to show you the package that we are going to use by just opening up npm right here. The package that I want to install is called Cheerio. So here is the package that we are going to need. Cheerio is a package that we will be using to essentially pick out HTML elements on a web page. It works by parsing markup and provides an API for traversing, manipulating, and resulting data structure. Cheerio's selector implementation is nearly identical to jQuery. So if you know jQuery, this will be familiar to you. So now that we know what we will be using it for, let's get to using it to pick out elements from a web page, specifically this web page right here. Okay, so this is the web page that I'm going to be scraping. And the things I want to scrape are the titles of the articles as well as the URLs. So if we inspect this page and just gravitate to here and then pick out, for example, click here, we would want the, I would say I'd probably want the div with the class item header, and then look in that the h3 tag with this class name, as well as the URL that comes with it. So I can build my climate change API that will give us information about climate change from various sources all over the world. Okay, great. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I've explained what we are going to be doing and why we're using Cheerio to do it. Let's go ahead and install Cheerio. So it tells me that to install, I need to use this command, npm I. I is for install. And I'm just going to go back into WebStorm and get up my terminal. And I'm just going to type npm I. I could type npm install. That is totally up to you. I'm going to install the package Cheerio, just like it told us to on npmjs.com. And just click enter. Making sure that we are in the project, making sure we are in the climate change API directory. Okay, that is pretty important. So that has now been installed, and there we go. We will see that a dependency has shown up. We have just installed Cheerio along with the version of it. Okay, so this is the version that we are working with for this tutorial. If for whatever reason you are getting a different version and that might be causing issues, please go ahead and just replace that here and just fill out the correct version. And then once you do that, just run npm I again, okay? npm I will essentially install all the dependencies that you see in this object right here, and then generate a package lock.json file from it. So in this package JSON log file, you will see that we have indeed gone to the npm.js registry and installed Cheerio. Okay, so here we go. We can see Cheerio has been installed for us. Great. So once again, a package lock.json file has been generated because we ran npm install, and that installed all these dependencies, and that is what generated the package lock.json file. Great. The next package that we are going to need to install is a package called Express.js. So Express.js, I'm just going to search that for you in here as well. Express is essentially a backend framework for Node.js. We are going to install it in order to listen, to parse, and listen out to our port to make sure that everything is working okay. What I mean by this is that if we visit a certain path or URL, it will execute some code and it will listen out to the port we define. But enough talking, let me show you what I mean by this. So once again, I'm just going to copy this command and go back to my project. I'm just going to clear that using Command K and run npm install express and just wait for that to install, and then it should show up in our dependencies just right here. Wonderful. So again, this is the version of Express I am using for this tutorial. If for whatever reason your code isn't working, it could be down to the version that you installed. Okay. We have a few more packages to install. The next package I want to install is a package called Axios. And Axios is a promise-based HTTP client for the browser and Node.js. Axios makes it easy to essentially send HTTP requests to REST endpoints and perform CRUD operations. This means that we can use it to get, post, put, and delete data. It is a very popular package and one that I use quite a lot on a day-to-day basis as a developer. So once again, I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to go in here and install it into my project so that it shows up in our dependencies. Wonderful. And those are the 3 packages that we need for this project. So hopefully you've got to this point. Hopefully you understand how to install packages or dependencies into your project. I feel now it's time to carry on and get to some actual coding. So I am just going to start by going into our index.js file and defining the port we want to open up our server on. This can be whatever you wish. I'm going to choose to run this on port 8000, just like so. And then I'm going to write some code. This is just some standard syntax for listening out to the port to make sure it's running. But before we do that, we actually need to initialize Express. So first off, let's get Express. So I'm going to use the package Express. Again, this is just standard syntax. We need to get the package. I'm going to save it as the const express. Okay, so this is just something that you will see being done here as well. In the setup, Axios require Axios. So this is again something that we will need to do. So I'm going to copy that. In order to use Axios in our backend, this is something that we need to do. So I'm going to put that here as well. And again, for Cheerio, const Cheerio equals require Cheerio. So that's all 3 of our packages done. Now to initialize using Express, well, I'm going to show you how to do this. So what I am going to do is essentially get Express and call it. So whatever the package comes with, I'm saving as Express and then I'm calling it. So it releases all its wonderful energy and all its packages and all the stuff that it comes with. I'm going to save this as app so we can use it further on. Okay, so once again, this line calls the Express function, it calls it and puts the new Express application inside the app variable to start a new Express application. So we have called this Express up here and we are now calling it and saving it as app so that we can use it in the rest of our project as we please. With all of the Express's powers that it comes with, things like app use, so app use. So essentially this is from the Express package or app get. There's a lot that it comes with essentially. It comes with a lot of power. Great. So now that we have that, let's get to using Express and using what we store as, which is app, in order to get our port up and running. So first off, we listen out for the ports. I'm going to use Express to listen out, Express listen out for port. And then I'm going to use a callback. And I'm just going to console log out in our backend server running on port, and then it'll show us our port. Okay, so this is what we need to write in order to just get a message to show us that everything is running fine on our server. However, we also need to write a script. So I'm just going to go back here. And under scripts, I'm going to get rid of this test script actually. So let's just get rid of that. We don't really need it. I'm going to write start. So I'm going to write a script for running the start command, and I'm just going to use nodemon index.js. Nodemon will essentially listen out for any changes on index.js. So now let's run our backend. I'm just going to use npm run start. And there we go. Server is running on port 8000. So our backend is working. Our app is listening out any changes made on port 8000. Wonderful. So this is looking good. We have now officially used Express, and Express comes with this listen, and we are using it to listen out to any changes on port 8000, or as we defined port 8000, we could have defined it as whatever we wish. We chose 8000. So this is now working. Let's carry on. Now, the first thing that I want to do is let's just start scraping our first web page. So what I'm going to do is write a path. So I'm going to do some routing. Once again, I'm going to use Express. I'm going to use app get just like so. And then I'm going to pass through a path. So if, for example, I just pass through the home page like that, that is the home page path. And then this is the syntax for routing. And then res JSON, and then let's just write something, welcome to my climate change news API, and click save. Remember, Nodemon is listening out for any changes. Okay, Nodemon's restarting due to changes. It's starting on index.js. So now if we visit port 8000, so I'm just going to get rid of this. Localhost 8000. Welcome to my climate change news API. So that is working. So what we have done here is listen out to any time we visit the home page. And then if we visit this, we get this response JSON, welcome to my climate change news API. Okay, we pass through a request. We pass through a response. This is just a helper that WebStorm is giving us. So I've not typed this out. That is a helper, as is this. It's telling us that this is a request and this is a response. I can change this. I can make this Ania is great. And that just means, let's save that. That just means that now if I visit the home page, there's nothing there. And if I visit Ania is great, if I spell it correctly, welcome to my climate change news API. So that is working. I'm just going to make it back to the home page. Hopefully you see now how that works. Great. But this isn't our API. We need to actually get some, interesting data coming back. And I want to scrape the internet to get the data from certain news articles coming back to me. So let's go ahead and do that. So to do this, I'm going to keep that as is. And once again, let's write app get. So exactly the same syntax as above. Let's pass through a request and response, just like we did before. And this time, let's say if we visit news, well, then I'm going to use Axios get, and I want to essentially visit this URL. Okay, I want to visit this URL. So let's grab that and let's just paste it. I want to visit this URL, and I also want to wait for that to return, because this is essentially going to return a promise. It's returning something back to us. So once that return comes back, I'm going to do some chaining. If you don't know much about async JavaScript, I do have a course on this that I really recommend. It's a 5-part series. So we're going to do some chaining with this. So we're visiting this URL, and then the response that comes back to us, well, I want to save this response. So const, let's save it as HTML, and I'm just going to save it as response data. Okay, just like so. So now if we console log HTML, and I'm just going to visit this path, make sure to save that page, and let's visit news. And now let's go back to here and see what comes back to us. Whoops, that's not meant to be here. Let's delete that and save. And visit this again, enter. Okay, so now you will see the HTML of this website coming back to us. Okay, so this is essentially everything from the Guardian website's page that we visited, this website page to be exact, and it's coming back to us. So that's all I've done. However, this is great, but we need to carry on. We actually need to pick out the elements. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And to do that, we're going to use Cheerio. And actually we can just get rid of this, and Cheerio has some commands that will help us do this. Load comes with the package Cheerio, and I'm going to pass through the HTML. So the response data saved to HTML, and I'm passing that through into Cheerio, and let's save this as the $sign. So now essentially that's allowed us, or you will see this is going to allow us to pick out elements. So this is the syntax for using the Cheerio package. We need to get the $ up, or essentially what we have defined here is $ we're now going to use. So I'm going to use that like so. And then I am going to look for any A tags that contain anything to do with climate. So what this means, just make sure that this is contains. So what this is doing is looking on this web page right here and then finding any elements that have the A tag. So for example, this one right here, and if it contains anything to do with climate change, for example, this one doesn't. So for example, this A tag consists of the word climate, so that should be picked out. So that's exactly what I am doing. I'm going through all the HTML and using this syntax, looking for A tags that contain the word climate. Okay, and then we just pass through the HTML. And then for each one that comes back, I'm assuming there's more than one. I'm just going to write function. So I'm going to pass through a function, so essentially a callback function, and whatever. So for each one that comes back to us, I'm going to grab its text, because essentially, once again, I want to grab the text that's in the A tag. Okay, I want to grab that. So let's save this as something. I'm going to save this as the title. So I'm going to go into this, so for each of them, and get the text. And I'm going to save this as a title. So we have decided this is going to be the title of the data that comes back to us. And next we need the URL. So what do we want the URL to be? Well, once again, whatever comes back to us, whatever we are saving, this. And I want to grab the href of it. So if we look in here, here's the href. So again, for every A tag that we find, I want to grab the href attribute. So I would do so by essentially getting the attribute like so, attribute href. Okay, great. So that's what we're doing. And then let's push it into its own array. So this is some JavaScript work. Articles is what I'm going to call my array. And I'm just going to save it. We can put it up here actually. So I'm just going to put it outside of this app get. So const articles. So it's global. We're going to get the articles and we're going to push a new object that we're going to create. And the object that I'm going to push in is going to have the title, the URL, and then, well, let's just see what this looks like. So I'm just going to display the articles in the actual browser using res.json. So we're pushing this object into the articles array, and then we're going to display the articles in the browser when we visit /news. And then let's also catch errors. So again, this is some chaining. If you know asynchronous JavaScript, then this will make sense to you. If not, once again, I do have a tutorial on this, a 5-part series on asynchronous JavaScript. So that is how we just catch any errors. Okay, so now let's visit /news again. And there we go. So we are getting our data back. If it looks like this, it's because we need a JSON viewer really. So if you don't have the Chrome extension JSON view, here it is. It essentially just makes everything a lot more readable. I'm just going to add that to Chrome like so. Okay, so that is being added. And once it is finished, then the icon will be visible. And there we go. So that is now a lot more readable for us. This is looking great. So every time that we found an A tag that contained the word climate, we essentially created this object. We picked out the title of whatever was in that A tag, and we picked out the href of it. So now I have an array full of titles and URLs from the Guardian page that we scraped. Okay, so how cool is that? We've officially created our first scraping tool. But I really want to make this a lot more meatier. I really want to give this a lot more value to anyone who wants to purchase my climate change news API. So I'm going to scrape from a lot of different websites, and I'm going to show you how. So this is part one. We've essentially learned how to scrape a website to retrieve back an array full of anything that contains news about the climate crisis or the word climate, the title and URL. But now I'm going to loop that in with a lot of others. So let's do it. So first off, I'm actually going to create an array of newspapers that I want to scrape. So we've got our articles here. Actually, above here, I'm going to store the newspapers. So const newspapers, and I'm just going to make an array. And I'm going to actually put through an array of objects, and you'll see why. I'm not just going to pass through the URLs. I'm going to pass through the name of the publication. So these are some that I found before. Let's go with the times, the address that we want to scrape, and this is going to be this URL right here. And I'm just going to paste a few more that I have. So we already have the Guardian. Let's also have the Telegraph. So the Times, Guardian, and Telegraph, all on specific climate change pages. So there's a lot more data for us. So we can start with 3. Let's do 3, and then we'll add a bunch more later. So here are the 3 newspapers that we want to scrape. Now I'm going to essentially edit my function right here to loop over all 3 publications. So I'm going to show you how to do this now. This time I am going to actually write this function outside of this. So I'm going to actually just use this as a template. I'm going to do this outside here. So maybe let's do it up here actually. So this time for each of the newspapers, so every newspaper in my newspaper array, newspapers, I think that's what we called it. So for each one of these, for each newspaper, this is why I said JavaScript was a good prerequisite, because if you don't know JavaScript, this can be extremely confusing. But you know, if you just want to use this code and just want to take it, then please just listen to me talking through it for you anyway. So for each newspaper, so for each item in my newspaper array, there's 3 items in there, 1, 2, 3. I want to get Axios get. So we're just using what we did before. This is a good refresher. And then I need to pass through the URL. So I'm going to pass through the newspaper address, newspaper singular, okay, because for every item, for every newspaper in our newspaper array, we can call this whatever we wish. We can call this dog. It doesn't matter. We are just saying that for each item in our newspaper array, well, I want to get the address. Making sure to spell address in the same one that we did above. So I'm passing through the URL. So just like we did here, I'm passing through the URL, however, just by looping over the array of newspapers. And then, so just like we did before, then we get the response. Okay. And once again, we need to get the response data, save it as HTML, and then pass it through into Cheerio load and save it as the $sign. So that's the same. Let's carry on. Now, once again, because I have looked at all these different newspapers and I've actually found newspapers that work to this style, and I've sort of adjusted this so that anytime you find an A tag, it just so happened that each A tag had some text in it. And it also happened to be that the A tag had the H reference, but that's expected from an A tag. So I can actually reuse this. So once again, for each of the 3 here, I'm finding an A tag that contains the word climate. Let's just make sure to close this off. Okay. And once again, what I am doing is looking at whatever comes back. Okay. Whatever comes back. So whatever comes back is this. And I'm getting the text from that A tag. And then I'm going to save this as title. And once again, I'm looking at each of the A tags. So this is the A tag, and I'm getting the attribute href, and whatever this value is, I'm going to save that as URL equals. Okay, and once we have that, I'm going to push it into articles. Articles push, and I'm going to make a new object which has a title and a URL, but this time also a publication. Okay, so this time I'm actually going to have the source newspaper address. Okay, so whatever we pass through, whatever newspaper we pass through, this time I'm going to get the newspaper address. Oh, actually, we should probably have the newspaper name instead. That would make more sense. Let's have the newspaper name show up as the source. Okay, so now, instead of having all this, I'm just going to delete all that. I'm going to just return the articles because this function will run and we're collecting all the articles. So what I want to appear here in the JSON and the browser, so once again we use our JSON, is the articles. So now if we visit /news, we get articles from the Times. We get the source URL, the Times, the title. This is looking great. We also get the Guardian articles. So we scrape the Guardian, and we also get Telegraph. Okay. However, this does not look like the correct URL. Let's just double check why. Okay. So we are visiting this URL and we are scraping it. So once again, let's go here. And once again, I have decided that I want to search for any A tags in here. So for example, this will probably be an A tag. So yes, we are an A tag that has a URL. So this URL is incomplete. It seems that it doesn't have a base. And then I'm looking inside it for some text. So anything inside this parent child of A, I'm looking for some text, and there is our title. So this is working fine. However, we need to make an adjustment. So this is the full URL, because if we click on here, it will not take us to anything. So our API is broken. People would not like that. So all I'm going to do is go back here and pass through a base. So this doesn't need a base. So I'm going to have that empty. This also doesn't need a base. The Telegraph, however, needs a base. And I'm just going to pass through the base, which is essentially https://www.telegraph.co.uk. Okay, so now that we have that base, it just means that the source we pass through, so the URL, well, the URL is not going to be just the URL, it's going to be the newspaper base, if that exists, plus the URL. Okay, so we're grabbing the URL, but we're appending the newspaper base in front of it. So that is looking good. Let's try that out again. Let's refresh this. And now if we visit the Telegraph section, you will see we have created a new URL, one that includes https://www.telegraph.co.uk. Wonderful. So there we have it. We have completed step 2. We have essentially got 3 newspapers and scraped all the information, all the articles about climate change from there, along with their titles and the URLs if we want to visit those articles. Wonderful. Now this is looking good. However, I do want to make another route, and that is to get information just from one newspaper article. So I'm going to show you how to do that just under here. So once again, we're going to use app-get, just like so. And this time the URL I want to pass through, so I want to visit, is going to be news /. And if we want to visit a particular newspaper ID, this is the syntax to do it. Bear with me because I think this is best explained by showing. So you need these 2 dots, and then whatever you pass through, I want it to return something. So I'm just going to pass through request response, this time making sure to put async right in front of it. And then I want to grab whatever newspaper ID I pass in front of news. So I can do so if I console log request, okay, And now let's just go ahead and visit /news, and Ania is great once again, and click enter. Nothing will show up here, but if we visit our console here, you will see a request, or everything that comes back request has been essentially console logged out for us. And in the params, you will see that the newspaper ID is Ania is great. Okay, so now this whole thing right here, all this text is the request. If I go .params, that will get this. And if I go newspaper ID, because that is what we've called it up here, I could call this whatever I wish. I could call it dog. And in this case, this will come back as dog equals Ania is great. So now if I console log that, and once again, let's visit something else. Ania is awesome. And scroll down here. Ania is awesome. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Whatever we pass through, this dot just means that, you know, it's an ID that we are passing through, an identifier. It could be whatever you wish. You can call it XXX, but essentially it's going to be saved under params when we visit the page. So now that we have that, I'm going to use this to my advantage. I'm actually going to save this as something. So rec params newspaper ID. And let's save this as the newspaper that we want to visit. So I'm just going to put newspaper ID, const newspaper ID. So if we visit, let's say /news /the Times, I just want information from the Times. Okay, that's all I want. So I'm just going to go Axios get, and once again, pass through the URL. Well, we know that we want everything. We want the URL from the Times. So we're going to use this array. And what I'm going to do is use some JavaScript. So we're going to get the array, and I'm going to filter the array to find the newspaper. Okay, so once again, for each newspaper, so each item, each of the 3 items in my newspaper array, I'm going to go through each one. And if the newspaper's name equals the newspaper ID, okay, you don't have to make it strict. So that is going to come back. So if I pass through news /the Times, it will come back. And if that matches the Times, well, I want to get the address. So to get this back, well, let's save this as something. Let's save this as const newspaper. Just going to comment this out for now. And if I console log newspaper, I expect that if I visit /the Times, oops, making sure to spell it exactly the same. Okay, so we're visiting that, nothing will happen here at the moment. But if we visit here, we get back the object from our array, we get back the whole object. And when we go into this object, we want to go into the array. So here's the array. I want to go into the array, and because there's only ever going to be one item, hopefully, I'm just going to go into the first item and grab the address. So I'm going into this item and grabbing the address, and let's save this now as newspaper address. Okay, so we have now hopefully got our newspaper address. Let's see if that works on another newspaper. So let's now visit Guardian, and let's go visit here, and great. We are getting back the URL of the Guardian if we pass through the ID of Guardian. Wonderful. So now that we have that, let's carry on. So we can use Axios get to pass through the URL, so the newspaper address of whatever path we visit based on the identifier, and then let's do some chaining. So once that comes back with a response, we're going to get the response. And once again, we need to get the response data, and let's save this as the const HTML. So this is going to be Cheerio at work, because we're going to get Cheerio load, making sure to spell Cheerio correctly like the package, and pass through HTML. And now let's save this as the $sign so we can use it. And once again, I'm actually going to collect all the articles here again. You can call this whatever you wish. That might be confusing. Maybe we can go specific articles, specific articles just to differentiate from the other articles array that we have globally. So let's say this are specific articles and an empty array. And this time, once again, we are going to look for any A tag that contains the word climate on the page that we are visiting. And then HTML, we need to pass that through. And for each item that comes back to us, so for each A tag containing the word climate that comes back to us, well, let's write a callback function. Oops, we have to make sure that these two are the same. Okay, so there we go, contains a climate, and making sure this is a $sign. I'm gonna get its text and save this as the title, so const title. I'm also going to get the URL by going into this and getting the attribute of href. And now we need to create an object and push it into specific articles. So I'm going to use push, create an object, which again, well, I'm going to pass through a title, the URL. The URL is going to also have a base. I think we need to get a base. So if there is a base to be added, this is how you would do it. We would go into our newspapers array again and filter by newspaper. So for each of the 3 items in our newspaper array, if the newspaper name matches the newspaper ID, so just like we did before, we're going to go into the object and get its base. And what should we say this as? Let's save it as newspaper base, just like so. Okay, so if a newspaper base exists, then we're going to add it to the URL. So right before the URL, and once again, the source, well, we know that this is just the newspaper ID. Great. So this is looking good. And then of course, we want to display this in the browser. So I'm going to use res.json to display the specific articles. Okay. And once again, we're just going to catch any errors. So this is the syntax for doing so, console log errors. And now visit this page. We will get all the news articles from the Guardian. And then if we go the Times, making sure to spell it exactly as we did in here, then we get all the newspaper articles from the Times. And if we just go back to all the news articles, we get all the news articles. And there we go. So now we've done it. We've created an API. We've figured out a way to get all the newspaper articles here. And then if we go / and then use the ID to get specific articles, which we will be explaining on the documentation when we build our API, we get just specific articles. Great. Before we move on to put this on RapidAPI, I'm actually going to add a lot more newspapers in here. So I'm just going to actually just paste a few that I made earlier. Okay, so now we have a lot more data coming back to us. Once again, I'm just going to visit here. So news, and ta-da! It's getting lots and lots and lots more data, up to 730 lines of data to be exact. Wonderful. Okay. So this is looking good. Let's carry on. Before we move on, I'm just going to format this a little bit better, just so it looks a lot more neater. I'm going to do selected text, optimize import, rearrange code, and run. And great. Okay, we don't actually need this, it turns out, so let's get rid of this. And now to prep for deploying onto Heroku, well, I need to include the Node.js package actually in the project, as right now we have it installed globally on our machines, but Heroku doesn't know that. So there we go, npm install Node.js. And finally, I need to change the port options for Heroku, so give it an option like this. And great. So this is looking wonderful. Again, you will be able to get this from my source code. I will share it. Please feel free to use it for educational purposes or to build your own API. Okay, so now let's go on to the RapidAPI platform. Okay, so here we are back on our RapidAPI dashboard. Let's actually call our API something. I'm going to call it climate change live. Let's call it that. And then an API showing all the latest climate change news around the world, as we do have Australian articles in there and some American ones, so it's quite worldy. Category, I'm going to say data maybe, or news. Let's go with news. I think that's probably most appropriate. And then the owner of this API will be me. That is correct. And I'm just going to keep it as UI and add the API just like so. Okay, so here we are. We need to add a base URL. Well, for this, I'm actually going to deploy my app onto Heroku. This should be relatively painless. So all I'm going to do is ask you to head over to Heroku, and you should see all the projects that I've hosted on this so far. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one, give it a name. Let's go at Climate Change API and choose the region and just click Create App. So there we go. Now we should have a lot of information on how to deploy this using Heroku. Okay, so if you haven't downloaded the Heroku command line interface, please go ahead and do so now. I'm just going to do that with you here. So here we go. I'm going to copy this command, go into my terminal, just create a new tab and run brew tap Heroku brew and brew install Heroku. Now, if you are an Apple user like me, you're going to also have to install Homebrew. So please go ahead and do this simply by copying this command here and pasting it in your terminal. I already have this installed, so I'm ready to continue. So this is only for Apple users. If you have another machine, please do use the equivalent. Okay, so that should be fine. That is installing, and that should be ready to go. So we have the command line interface installed. Let's carry on with the instructions given to us. So once that has finished downloading, I'm just going to run Heroku login and then just click any button to open it up. So this is just to make sure that we are logged in. So I'm just going to click log in here, just like so. And we are now logged in. We can close this page and continue with doing this process. So now we're going to run git init. And that has now initialized an empty Git repository in my project. Okay, so making sure that we are still in Climate Change API. Now let's carry on. The next command I need to do is take this command right here and just paste it like so. So we are just going through all the commands. There we go. Great. So now before we move on, I'm going to actually add a git ignore file so that we don't upload any node modules before we start adding files. So I'm just going to go ahead and write git ignore. And what I am saying is that I want to ignore the node modules from being committed and just save that. Okay, so now we can carry on. I need to add the files. The next thing we need to do is commit the files, a message, let's say final commit, and push it to master. So just like so. And there we go, the build has succeeded. So let's go ahead and check it out. Okay, great, and there we have it. We have deployed our site. It is now live. All our data is now live just right here. The next thing I'm going to do is go back to RapidAPI and continue. So now that we have done that, I'm just going to upload an image that I want to represent my API. And in here on the website, I'm going to use the URL that we have just created. So we have deployed this URL. This is where our app is going to sit. I'm going to use that right here. And next, I'm just going to go ahead and whack that in. The next thing we're going to do is add some endpoints. So what shall we call the first endpoint that we are going to create? Well, I'm going to create my first REST endpoint. So just go ahead and click here and let's call this get all climate change news. And we can give it a description saying that this endpoint will return back all news about climate change from all over the world. Now, with the endpoint here, we're just going to specify what we did before. So to get all the news articles, we had /news, and this is indeed a GET request. We're going to get that data. So that is all we have to do. We don't have any parameters we need to worry about for this occasion. And then we have all these options to us. We are using Node.js and we are using Axios as it has picked out. So this is all we really need to do for now. But however, if you do want to see the others, please go ahead and do that. Okay, so for this one, I'm actually going to start off with the newspaper ID. So I'm just going to go ahead and go /news, and then we can't use .newspaper ID. That will not work. As you can see, we need to put this in curly braces, just like it is prompting us to do. So that's what I'm going to do. There we go, newspaper ID. It's already picked out that this is my parameter, so that is looking good. And let's go ahead and put an example value. So we know that one of them is Guardian. So I'm just going to put in Guardian, and you can see that has populated right here. And go ahead and save that. So we've got that, and we can see some example responses showing up. We also have mock responses too, if we wish. So if you wish to fill this out, please go ahead and do so here. So I can actually do this. So I'm just going to go ahead. So this is essentially all really useful when people visit RapidAPI and see our API, so they can see what kind of responses to expect when they visit a certain endpoint. It's really useful, and it just allows people to have an idea of what your API can provide and what kind of value it gives. And of course, we have the plans and pricing. Now, here are some public and private plans. This is sort of what it looks like, and the basic one is free. So for example, I can say that we have unlimited requests, or we can change the monthly requests, so on the free option, to be 1,000 per month. We can have a pro plan, so let's go ahead and add a pro plan. And once again, this is going to be for all endpoints. And once again, you can change the quota type and quota limit, and then have overages as well. And then let's say that we charge 0.1 extra for overages. Okay, so you can do whatever you like. Let's just go ahead and save that. So this is a little bit higher. It's not super high. I'm not going to charge anyone like an extravagant amount for this, but these are the options that you have. Okay, so there we go. This is looking good. Let's go ahead and publish this. So I'm going to make API visibility public. And there we go. Here is my API live on RapidAPI. You can see the two endpoints that we have, so we can get all the news, and we can also get the news based by newspaper ID or a newspaper. We of course have to give people the newspaper IDs available, and that is all done in my API documentation that has been actually generated for us nicely by RapidAPI. So here you can see all the example responses, and you also have the drop down that we saw earlier. So if you want to make this by Node.js, it gives you the code available to you. So you can just copy this and put it in your project. And there's a bunch of others too. So whatever you feel more comfortable with, that is available as an option. Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you now have your own API that you can sell and pass on to people, pass on to friends, to make some money out of it. Again, like, please feel free to charge as much as you feel comfortable with charging and selling your API for. For now, that's it from me. Thanks very much. All the code and source code will be available in the description, as well as links to RapidAPI. So please go ahead and do check this out.